Meet Charles J. Guiteau, the man who killed Garfield. No, not that one. He killed President of the United States, James A. Garfield. This man is essentially going to be the main character of this video, given he's the one that killed the president, and boy is he a character. Charles J. Guiteau described himself as a lawyer and theologian. However, despite this, he was also, by all accounts, an absolute lunatic, to the point that even the US National Park Service calls him obviously mentally ill. Basically, nobody liked him, including his wife, as he was also known to be an abusive husband for the short time he was married. This all becomes notable when, after joining a commune, losing a lawsuit against said commune, trying to start the first religious newspaper in the US, and subsequently failing to start the first religious newspaper in the US, he started to gain an interest in politics. In particular, Guiteau was a supporter of the stalwart faction of the Republican Party, who had nominated Ulysses S. Grant for the presidential candidacy. So much so, in fact, that he wrote a long series of speeches in support of Grant. However, as soon as a third candidate started gaining traction, he literally just switched out all the names in all his speeches from Grant to Garfield. Jump forward a couple months, and when Garfield takes the election, Guiteau concludes that
that was all me. It was all me. I single-handedly gave Garfield the presidency.
Yeah, that. And as such, he believed that he should be given the position of Minister of Austria and Consul of Paris. For those of you unaware, that basically just means that he would be a representative of those countries in the US, kind of like an ambassador. After having letter after letter get refused, he starts showing up to the White House and State Department to ask about his consulship. By this point, he has been repeatedly asking both Garfield and members of his cabinet on a regular basis. And hey, look over there. It's James Blaine, the Secretary of State.
So, about that consulship.
Never bother me again about the Paris consulship as long as you live!
So this is around the time when Guiteau decides that he should do something a little more drastic.
I have it. I have my plan. I am going to go shoot the president. No, of course, it's not a murder. It's instead a political necessity. For God, of course, has given me a divine command that he must die. Oh, come on, calm down, everybody, calm down. Everything is going to be alright. All I did was shoot him a little bit.
It took a whole 80 days, but Garfield eventually succumbed to his wounds. Unfortunately, researchers today, for the most part, believe that he could have survived, if not for the medical procedures at the time, lacking such practices as hand washing and sanitation, which are standard today. Guiteau, however, seemed to be having a great time following the death of the president. In fact, while in jail, he wrote a letter to the new president, reading,
Dear Mr. President, I'm sure you must be pretty happy with your new position as the President of the United States of America. To me, at least, it seems like a pretty massive upgrade in comparison to your previous job. You know, if I were you, I would be thanking a certain Charles J. Guiteau for opening up this position for you. Sincerely, Charles J. Guiteau.
During his time in jail, he also wrote an autobiography, and even was kind enough to include an offering at the end for
an elegant Christian lady of great wealth, under 30 of course.
After his time in jail began his trial. The defense essentially consisted of saying that Guiteau was insane and that the doctors were responsible for the death of the president. While this defense, proposed by Guiteau's lawyer, sounds reasonable enough on paper, Guiteau can be quoted as saying,
Yes, I shot the president, but his physicians killed him.
As well as claiming that he was insane specifically because his free will was taken away by God, and that he was
a man of destiny as much as the Savior, or Paul, or Martin Luther.
As you can imagine, this really didn't work out all too well for him, seeing as he was shortly thereafter sentenced to be hanged. And that brings us right back to the present. where this guy is about to say his last words in the form of a poem. Yeah, I'm not gonna force you to listen to all of that. Anyways, now that that's over, I can talk about what actual impacts this had on history. As you would imagine, the death of the President of the United States has a lot of impacts. For the medical community, the medical procedure was very publicized, which wasn't really something that had happened before. This exposed some issues with the medical procedures of the time. For the government, this whole ordeal resulted in reforms to the legal system surrounding presidential succession, as well as the assignment of federal positions. For the nation as a whole, it actually improved foreign relations, specifically with Great Britain, who were sympathetic towards the Americans' loss of a leader. So, all in all, despite the tragedy of his death, the overall impact on the United States was generally a net positive.
So really, what you're saying is, I won.
How are you alive? I watched you get hanged